me about it. Come on, let's talk about it. Change up the things you see. Open your mind to possibilities. Find your power, passion, and your purpose. You know it's time for you to walk in greatness. Let's murder mediocrity. Slay your goals, live out your dreams. Right now. Inspirational perspective.
Made a very special announcement on social media. And many of my listeners, if you don't follow me on social media, then you don't know what the announcement was. And so I'll just go ahead and kick it off and share with you that my wife, Pam, is pregnant. We are expecting our second child come August. August 30th is the due date. And so incredibly excited about that. And now it looks like I'm a father twice. And I'm incredibly excited. And if I'm honest, also a bit nervous. I see Justin shaking his head because he's a father. And he knows. And you got to tell me what that transition was like going from 1 to 2, man, because it's like, oh, man, you have everything. We feel like we have everything figured out, you know, with 1. You know, like the cadence, like everything is kind of, we got it all figured out. And now number 2 is on the way. And it's like, okay, all this is going to change. And as we know, if there's one thing that humans don't like, it's change. But actually, the 2 changes that humans navigate probably the best is childbirth and initially marriage in the honeymoon stage. Then they're like, why did I change all this? And then that change, you know, later, I don't know if we navigated so well. Which is why, you know, you have what's it, like a 50-50? It's actually, believe it or not, marriage rates have increased. The success of marriage has increased over the last 20 years. So couples are staying together longer, and that's good. So it's more like a 40% chance of failure. 60% are staying together. But so man, really excited about that. And wow, it's like, wow, okay. But August 30th, and so we'll have a new addition to the family. We're not sharing the gender yet, but that'd be a whole thing, of course. We do know. We're just not sharing yet. And so, and our day knows, so our day don't mess up. But very excited about that. And since the news, you know, it's tough for me not to think about my mom, who passed away last year. It'd be a year come July 12th. And part of the reason for that, in talking about the parenting challenge today, is because whenever I had any type of parenting question, it was I always went to my mom. I could always call my mom and ask her that question. Now, the beautiful thing about my mom's legacy is that she left lots of resources, and more than I actually anticipated. I went through everything I could find on my mom, my emails, my text messages, just everything I could find looking for resources around parenting. And I found a lot. I found quite a bit. So I've been working with my marketing team to compile some of it. So again, some of you all who follow me on social media, you'll notice that we've begun like sharing parenting tips from my mom, like quotes from my mom, etc. And that's been a really, really insightful, fun, somewhat emotional process to go through. But still, nonetheless, like I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm so happy that my mom left so much behind. And to that point today, one of the things I want to talk about are what my mom called the 10 steps of teaching responsibility to a child. And so I want to kind of weave this into this conversation about the parenting challenge. And I love to hear from any of you out there who are parents. You've raised, children already, or you're currently raising children, and you have a perspective on the parenting challenge. Give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. And as you know, June, we dedicated the month of June to relationships. And the last, I believe, probably most complicated, most rewarding relationship that you will have is likely with your children, and how to parent. One of the main things that I find in my work as a coach is that what inhibits us most as adults is childhood trauma. Childhood trauma. Like, so many of the goals, many of the things that we want to accomplish in our lives, the reasons that we're not necessarily accomplishing it is because of some level of childhood trauma or things that we were told as children that we somehow absorbed and then began to believe. Other parts of it is exposure as a child to things we shouldn't have been exposed to. The traumas that many people experience from, you name it, from physical abuse to sexual abuse to neglect. The list goes on in terms of the things that children can be exposed to or in some way have happened to them because a child is so vulnerable. So we enter the world in this incredibly vulnerable state. I remember when my son was born. There's nothing that a child can do for themselves without some help from a parent or an adult of some sort, right? Or in some cases, because I've heard this too, an older sibling, where there are older siblings who have parented their younger sibling because the parents weren't available or for whatever reason weren't being responsible. And so these traumas begin to impact the child and overall begin to impede on what is possible. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Because it doesn't impede on what's possible in a person's life. I believe that no matter what happens, we can overcome those things. But what it does is it actually creates barriers and obstacles that are higher in some ways than the average person that have to be overcome. Let me give you an example of what I mean when I say this, right? So, because I've seen it so much in my work, from sexual abuse as a child and what that does to a person and their ability to have relationships. I've shared very openly that I was sexually abused by a woman at the age of 8 or 9, a woman or older. She was an older teenager. And the impact, I've shared in some ways the impact that had on me in terms of how I did relationship and function in relationship before therapy. And so these things have an impact. And then by the way, you all, like these childhood traumas often will go like when you become adult, you forget that while I had this horrible thing happen to me or I had this event take place that now may be impeding my ability to create the life that I intend to create, whether it's in my health. And let me just kind of walk through this, because one of the things that I've noticed in my work, another thing I've noticed in my work, is often when you see someone who is obese or incredibly overweight, there's a story. It's not just a eating disorder of some sort. Sometimes we think, well, that person has an eating disorder. But typically, and this is what I'm learning as I work with more and more people on very intimate levels, often if you talk to, let's say, a woman, and you begin to understand her past and the traumas of her past, that weight has become like it's an unconscious way for her to protect herself from what used to be sexual abuse. Right? It's like, well, if I'm big like this, then I won't be seen as a sexual object, and so as a result, I don't have to endure this type of sexual abuse. And then it kind of rolls into adulthood where now this way of being is just a way of being, not really understanding that this is what's getting in the way. So then fast forward 20, 30 years later, this person is saying, well, I want to have good health and I like to lose weight, but they're finding it incredibly difficult because the source, the root of what is causing them to be obese hasn't been healed, which is getting therapeutic support for that sexual trauma. And once that's healed and addressed, then with clients, I've actually seen the weight fall off. Right? So as I talk about this challenge of parenting, then as parents, like my job is to make sure that my child isn't violated physically, sexually, mentally, right? Which is, can happen in a school system by a teacher. That my child is not being given or coming in contact with cognitive distortions. What are cognitive distortions? Like mental illusions that are placed there because of experiences, notable experiences of the past. So this is the challenge. And so for me, going into parenthood now a second time, like these are the things that are top of mind for me. Like how does one, and this is what I'd like to discuss with the audience this morning. But how do we, as parents, expose our children to enough so that they can be challenged and aware and grow in this world without letting them so far outside the barriers that they experience these traumas that impede their ability to really fully. I keep saying that. It's not what I mean to say, because I do believe we can reach our possibilities despite what may have happened in childhood, but there's work. Like there's work that has to be done, right? And so slow down our possibilities for reaching our fullest potential and possibilities in this life, and ultimately serving the purpose that the Creator put us on the planet for. Let me ask this question first. Like, is it possible to actually raise a child without them having been traumatized? Let me ask you two gentlemen. I don't know if you've been through therapy and all that, but would you say that you experienced some type of trauma as a child? Like, you'd be like, yeah, this was traumatic for me. Ade, Justin, would you say, as men, that as a boy, at some point in your life, you experienced something that you were like, man, this is traumatic?
Yeah.
Yes?
I would say so.
Yeah? All right. So then, would you say that got in your way in some, like that trauma, or that trauma got in your way in some area of life?
For me, yeah, relationships.
Relationships. Okay. What about you, Ade?
For me, no, actually.
No? Okay. It hasn't gotten in your way. Okay. So that's a good thing. Now, somebody's probably saying, well, how does Ade know? Let me explain to you. Let me tell you a story right quick about how a child can be traumatized, but it not impede their ability to grow. And matter of fact, it can help them. And so we talked about this. I see the callers. I'll begin to you all in a second. Again, 773-591-1690 if you want to join the conversation on parenting. But so over this camping trip, my son and I obviously camped out together. We were with a group of other fathers, but my son and I shared a tent. And We got there Thursday early evening, set up camp, situated ourselves, and we knew that there would be rain Friday morning. So we knew rain was coming, and so we situated ourselves accordingly. What we didn't know is that the rain was going to be accompanied by a fierce windstorm beforehand. Okay? Like, we didn't know that. So Friday morning, I got up like about 5. The sun was breaking. 'Cause it was kind of breaking. It was, sunrise. So I got up, had to use the bathroom, checked on things in the campsite, whatever, went back to bed, laid down. About an hour later, I woke up to my son, like, basically kind of like screaming, like, ah, you know what I mean? And the reason he was screaming is because the tent was blowing, not blowing over, but blowing, like, what's the best way to describe it? Like voraciously. I mean, it's blowing, like, it's like, it was like really blowing, right? So I wake up, I'm like, oh man, this is more wind than we anticipated, right? It's like, wow, okay. And right as I'm beginning to kind of assess the situation, and the first thing any camper knows, you check the 4 corners of the tent, right? Make sure you're still staked. We're still staked. We're good, right? And so we're still staked, and I'm like, okay, well, to ensure we stay staked, let me put my bag in one corner and his bag in the corner where the wind is coming, right? And we're on a peninsula between water, so we're really catching some wind. I calm him down. Look, man, you're going to be okay, right? And, he looking at the tent, move like, I don't know, right? So let's just say this was, at the age of 5, 4 or 5, he turned 5 on Sunday, that this is somewhat of a traumatic experience. Now, let's fast forward because it's not over. So then I'm like, look, I need to go outside and check the tent, right? Like, I need to make sure that this tent doesn't blow over, and so I have to leave him inside the tent. He's like, no, Daddy, no. Like, he is vehemently like, nah, man, don't leave me in this tent, bro, right? Like, that's it. No, Daddy, no. I'm like, look, man, you're going to be okay. All right, I got you. I wouldn't put you in a bad situation. I need you to understand that. And go ahead and just chill out, sit down. I'll be right back. All right, so I walk outside. And part of the reason I have to go outside because one of the straps on the cover that keeps the tent waterproof, it pops loose. Pow! So now imagine that's blowing like, so you got one corner of your tent blowing in the wind, right? And these are like 50-mile-an-hour winds, y'all. So, I mean, this is like serious, okay? Stuff is blowing around outside now, and we got a tent. So I get up, and the other fathers are in the same mode. Like, and it's fun. It's like like we kind of smile at each other because one of the fathers is in his boxers, right, in his T-shirt, barefoot, like trying to strap down the side of his tent. I'm strapping down one of the sides of my tent. The hook is missing, so I got to like tie, I got to tie it up, pull it down to the stake, put that stake under my foot, get it into the ground. All right, we good. My son walks out the tent. Like, he got to look, like he looking around and he sees, like, we're on a peninsula. So he sees the water is like splashing up against the shore. You got tree limbs flying around, and he's just looking like, yo, this is crazy, right? So we go back inside the tent, and he's like, Daddy, we going to be okay? I'm like, man, we're going to be all right, man. It's all good. I'm calm. We're going to be all right. But while I'm calm, I got my feet on the tent door. So you got the 2 corners being held down by the books, and I got to put my feet on that tent door because the wind is blowing, and I want to make sure it doesn't pull those stakes out the ground, right? So I'm like leaning with my feet on. I'm like, we going to be fine, man. It's all good, right? I give him a little smile, right? So he calming down. All right. So let's be clear. That was traumatic. It's not over. So right when I'm saying that, the wind is blowing the branches and things so much that something hits the top of the tent, bow, cuts it open. And now you got these big blotches of rain coming down. Like when I was staking the tent, I was getting wet a little bit, but big blotches of rain, not like small blotches. You know how it is right before in a thunderstorm. These big blotches of rain. And so he sees that. He's like, whoa, like, you know what I mean? Which is, that's a valid response to your tent being torn open in one spot in the rain. So I'm like, all right, man. I said, look, when things like this happen, we can't panic. So I'm giving him like life lesson, right? In this traumatic experience. Because I know for him as a 4 or 5 year old, this is like I know we gonna make it, but I'm not sure he knows, right? Right? And so I'm like, look, man, at times like this, you have to use your brain. Now, of course, I'm saying this to a 4 or 5 year old. And so his natural response without a fully developed neocortex is to panic, right? So I started to calm him down. I'm like, you got to help daddy. So I put him to work. I'm like, move everything from this side of the tent to that side of the tent because we're going to get water. Like, ain't nothing we can do, right? Don't make sense to go outside, right? We're going to get water. So let's not get wet. That's the point, right? So we push everything over. Now, here's what's interesting. As soon as he got busy, like as soon as he had something to do, like his level of panic started to drop. And I think it was interesting to notice because one of the things that happens in adults who lived in high trauma as children, they have low executive functioning. What I mean by that is adults who lived in high trauma typically struggle with things like goal setting, like, okay, 1, 2, 3. Executive functioning is first I need to do X, second I need to do Y, and then third I need to do Z to complete this large task. And adults who had lots of trauma as children, they struggle with that, all right? And so right in this traumatic situation, I'm like, all right, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And so let's get them done, right? So we started doing those things. I'm like, I need to go back outside. He's like, no, daddy. Don't go back outside. I'm like, I got to go outside. I got to figure out if I can plug this hole in some kind of way. So I go back outside. I'm like, but you have a job. Get everything from this side to that side. All right. So I go outside. He unzips the window. He looking, You want to make sure I'm my man. Go to work, bro. So anyway, go outside. I see a tarp. Try to use the tarp as best I can. Get back into the tent. And it's still the wind. Now, mind you, the wind is blowing. Now it's raining. And he's like, Dad, I'm scared. I said, well, you know what Dad does whenever he gets scared? He prays. This is why we pray to God. He looked at me and he said, pray to God? I said, yeah, pray to God when you're afraid. Why don't you say a prayer? So he says, okay. So he starts to pray. He says, God, I'm really scared. I don't like this wind. Can you please soften it so I won't be afraid anymore? True story, y'all. Like 120 seconds later, the wind slows down and it just starts raining, which he's used to. He's used to rain in a tent, right? The wind slows down. It starts raining. And he goes back to sleep. And I shared this story because, to our day's point, I believe that a child can experience some level of trauma and it actually not affect them negatively. It affects them positively. And that is like trauma that's controlled. Because no doubt he was afraid. Okay, he was afraid. I could tell. Like when I touched his arm, he was shaking. Okay. But he formed in that moment a new relationship with God. I saw it happen. Like, and when it slowed down, I said, "Oh, God, listen to you." And he smiled, and I said, "See, he got your back. He's gonna take care of you, so you can go back to sleep." And he laid down, out. And it just, then it was just raining. With the little, of course, drop in the tent from time to time. Boop. Boop. That, of course, I'm paying attention to, like, right? I say that because that's the reason I take my son camping. So we can have unpredictable experiences that we actually make it through. And to me, that is part of the challenge of parenting, of how do we put our children in these, like, as we protect them in these situations that are still uncertain, that give them life skills so that they can navigate the world, as dark as the world is, as dark as some humans can be. They can navigate this world successfully as they move to adolescence, young adulthood, and then later become adults themselves.
I don't know what's going to keep the trauma down, but I know good parenting and families teaching you things and being there as a constant staple for stability is going to still help make a difference. But I'm going to tell you something. Even the best teacher, the roaring lion, is out here. He's coming to tear up everything.
No doubt. That's good. Thanks, Anita.
He's serious about it.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what drastic stuff he does to your small children.
At all.
He does not care. So do take it seriously, including polluting the land or putting them in jails, or putting them in wars and killing them.
That's true.
It's just really bad. People have to stay active and be in control of their life and vote in their government.
No doubt.
It's really important.
No doubt. All right. Thanks for the phone call. Man. So that brings up this whole notion of, like, schooling, which is, I mean, it's a challenge right now. So Legend turned 5. He's headed to kindergarten. And it's a challenge that my wife and I were constantly having this conversation, because government, like, so public schools, like, the curriculum, I'm not fully aligned with. And even the fact that they're having conversations with children as early as 5 and 6 about sex, right? So it's like, okay, do I want him in a school like that? Like, do I want to introduce the concept of sex to my son or to my child at 5 or 6 years old, where he's really, like, it's not even on his mind. You get, like, it's not even, like, he's not awake to that. Or, to Anita's point, put him in a system where other children are, right? My brother's told me some stories, man, when he was working in the school systems of things he experienced with children because of what they saw mama doing, right? So they walked out the room and mama had boyfriend on the couch, and it's like, my mama did this, so I'm going to do it. And I mean, incredibly young, right? But what Anita was talking about in terms of our children, you can do everything you can, but then they go to school and they get exposed to everything you didn't want them to be exposed to because other parents aren't as diligent. So then what school do I put them in? And I want to at least put them in a school where parents are at least attempting to be diligent, because they wouldn't have them in that school otherwise, right? It's like, it's tough. But then here's the other side of it. Then if I do that, there's a certain level of sheltering. Let's be clear. So then how do I make sure that my children get the exposure that they need in the world so that they don't show up as sheltered? Because we've all ran into that sheltered person. You like, you different, you weird. Like, you know what I mean? It's just, you different. And they don't know it, but everybody else knows, like, you're not right, right? So, you also want them to be socially astute at the same time so they can have a good life. It's part of the challenge, man. Here's the interesting thing about today's show. Like, when I chose it, I'm like, parenting, you don't really have a lot of parenting podcasts. You don't have many parenting shows. And there's a reason why. I'll tell you why. Because, especially in America in particular, we are so given to entertainment that they don't last. They can't even get sponsorship. I was talking to a couple who do like a parenting and relationship podcast, and they moved more towards relationship because relationship is like people, they want to talk about that, right? And they stopped. And I asked them, I said, well, why did you guys veer away from parenting? They're like, oh, we didn't have sponsors when we talked about parenting. Really? It's not really like the most sexy conversation, like this whole idea of parenting, which I find fascinating when you think about. I guess it's proven to me that as a society, we have become so ingratiated with instant gratification that even a conversation about parenting that impacts in many ways our immediate future, because time moves fast. I mean, I felt like I was our day's age yesterday, right? 20 years later, you're like, I'm a father, I'm a husband, all these things, and now, this matters. So I knew today talking about parenting, it wasn't going to be wildly popular. But I still believe, I'm curious about how YouTube numbers will do. We're still gonna post it, but I still believe we need these type of resources, and we need to have these kind of conversations. I want to talk about something my mom shared some time ago. She calls it teaching responsibility in 10 steps, like how to teach a child responsibility in 10 steps. Boy, do I wish she was here to cover this herself. But she's not, but she left this behind. And so I just wanted to run over it in the second hour, these 10 steps for teaching responsibility in children, and also having a conversation with other parents. So give me a phone call, 773-591-1690. And again, all this coming from the big question that I have, that as a parent, is it possible, how do I meet, another way to say this is, how do I meet the challenge of raising an independent, courageous, mentally healthy child that isn't sheltered and unaware of the true nature of other human beings, the world, and life? Like, how do we as parents do that? And so with this question, of course, I've been going through a lot of my mom's writings and material. She has a really good one called, and we'll talk about this at some point. It's called The Building Blocks of Character for Children. It's basically like a book. I'm reading and I'm like, it keeps going. And it keeps going. I'm like, wait a second. So I start scrolling. I'm like, did Ma write a book? And not really even, you know what I'm saying? Not even really know it. So anyway, I'm reading that right now, which is really good. And so, and by the way, my sister and I are working. We're both trustees of her estate, and we're working on actually taking this work and turning it into books and things that parents can use and have as a resource, because I know that is who my mom was, and it's part of her legacy. The first one was, creating awareness in your child. And basically what my mother said is that children must be taught everything. You can't assume that they don't know something. And so you have to create awareness across the board in your child for everything. And right away, what comes to me, right, is how do I make my child aware of evil? Right? Because they're exposed to goodness, and most children have a very Pollyannish view of the world. And here's the challenge, because once you expose your child to evil, they will look for it. And, sometimes find it in places where it's not, but often find it in places where it is. For example, I recall my son, like, shortly after he started learning that not every adult was good. Like, hey, man, you can't just, run around like that. Somebody will snatch you up. You're like, what do you mean? I'm like, there's some people that are bad that just, want to take and abuse a child. He had that look on his face, like, like horror, like, because there's a new awareness now. Like, what? Like, yeah, man, you can't do that. It's like, okay. So then right behind it, he's like, we're the evil people, right? And then here's the crazy part. This is what I love about children. He actually did it to a fat man at O'Hare, where, I mean, seriously, him and I, we get off the plane, we go to the bathroom, and he uses the bathroom, I use the bathroom, wash our hands, we're walking out, and we got to step to the side because this man is walking in. He's like, man, Dad, he's very fat. And I was like, you look and you go, and all I could say is, yes, he is. Like, because it's the truth. And the man looked at me, and I was like, but sir, you are, right? Like, he called it out, right? And I'm not going to, one of the things you see in the top 10, these 10 that my mom laid out, was one of them is talking about being absolutely 100% truthful with your child and teaching them what truth is, right? And so I adhere to that one, like, yeah, he is fat, son. He was a big guy. So, but on the flip side, the other thing he's done is said, that's a bad man. Out of nowhere, we could be walking. He'll see, because now he's aware and looking for good and bad and evil. And I looked at the man, and the man looked, and I was kind of like, okay. And then I'm thinking to myself, he might be, right? Like, he might be. And I do believe that children pick up vibes. But anyway, that's the first one, creating awareness. The second one is make things as easy as possible by showing your child simple solutions. And she uses the example of, like, using systems to get things done, like, using systems and using routines to help your child become more responsible and understanding how to put up toys, or how to clean their room, how to get dressed, like using systems across the board. Like my son, like an example of this is my son has adopted my routine. So even when we were camping, it's like we wake up, we brush our teeth, right? So we wake up, we start brushing our teeth, and like, all right, man, let's go use the bathroom and spit the toothpaste out, right? We spit the toothpaste out, go use the bathroom in the forest. That's what you do, right? But same routine all the way around, where it's like, all right, brush your teeth in the morning, do this, like a complete routine. What that does is it makes it easy for a child. That's number 2. Number 3 is require responsible behavior. And how my mom broke it down was age-appropriate participation in responsible processes should be required by parents. Because what this does, she says, is it exercises the child's mind and muscles, and the child will take these areas of responsibility and use it in their teens and as an adult. And we all know some adults where you like, man, your parents didn't teach you. They didn't teach you better than that, man. But it's like require responsible behavior. You would think that's a very simple one, but I imagine that it's not. Number 4. Parents model what responsible behavior looks like. Huge. We have to clean up. We have to, you have to talk about hygiene. Like, and what I love about this one, my mom's sharing this one, this is number 4, model what responsible behavior looks like, is because my son, at this point, will hold my wife and I accountable to certain things. Like yesterday, my wife put on her pajamas. And he's like, Mom, you take a shower? She's like, yes, I took a shower. Like, kind of like, get out my business. But he's like, you should wash your butt, like, well, he knows that. He's very clear about that. And that's responsible behavior. Like, you should shower. You should brush your teeth. You should take care of your hygiene. You should, wash your face when you wake up and, put lotion on your face before you walk out the house. Don't walk out the house with a dry face. All these things that you wonder why some adults show up the way they do. It's simply because they haven't been taught. And these are just like 10 simple steps of responsibility. Number 5 is rewarding your child with praise. Applauding them with positive praise and ensuring to praise anything that they do that should be acknowledged and acknowledging them when they ask for acknowledgement. Then she put something here very clear. And I'm curious what parents think about this. She said, never pay a child with money for doing something that they are supposed to do. Like, never pay a child. I thought that was interesting. Like, never pay a child with money for doing something that they are supposed to do.
I don't know if this is on your list or not, but I know it's important not to praise the clothes. When your child is all dressed up and you go, oh, look at that beautiful dress you have on it. Oh, beautiful. Never do that.
Now, why do you say that? Why do you say we shouldn't praise the clothes?
Because if you don't want your children to think that materialism is better than the essence of who he is, that is not the clothes, but it's, wow, look at those sparkling eyes. Oh, where did you get your wonderful smile from?
I like that.
Then that's the difference between it's coming from them and who they are instead of what they have on.
Yeah.
Because at one time children were being killed because of jackets and gym shoes. That's right.
So. And now, when you look at the level of materialism in our community in particular, so materialism and consumerism, what you just said, like, I'm like, man, I wonder how we as parents have contributed to that materialism and that consumerism, because, we'll say things like, wow, look at those shoes. Or like you said, like, you don't say, look at that dress, look at that smile, look at those eyes. But we're saying, look at how good she looks in that dress.
Right, because they bought something new.
Yeah. Number 6 is tell the world about their accomplishments. And how she broke this down is we advertise their strengths, and we cover their weaknesses on a personal level, right? So advertise your child's strengths, cover weaknesses on a personal level, and you create a safe space for the child to talk about those weaknesses and ensure that the child feels safe overall, because if not, that's when they typically act out and you see anger and things like that. So that's number 6. Telling the world about their accomplishments, keeping the weaknesses private. Makes me wonder about self-esteem. Like, I mean, as parents, we play a huge role in our child's self-esteem. I've actually seen parents belittle their child before. And I wonder if that's one of the ways. So one of the other things I notice in coaching is most people don't want to become their parents, but in some ways they do. And I wonder if, well, it's not even a wonder, like how you learn to parent, how you learn to parent may not be the way to parent, because you learned it from your parent who likely, especially in our community, if they grew up in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it's likely that there was some level of dysfunction. I'm just going to be straight, right? I know I'm hurting somebody's feelings like, oh, I don't have any dysfunction. But part of what they say in ACA is Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families. They say the first step, like it's a 12-step process, and the first step is overcoming your denial that you grew up in dysfunction. So if you don't believe you grew up in dysfunction, I get it, because the first step in the 12-step process is actually admitting to yourself that there was some level of dysfunction and understanding that most of us live in denial, especially when it comes to our parents, and especially if there wasn't any like hardcore trauma we experienced from our parents in particular. But we have to understand that many of our parents grew up in dysfunctional environments, right? I'm Gen X, and so my parents are in their 60s at this point. Okay, my mom was in 63 when she passed. My father's currently 65, and so no, 66. My father's 66, and so they grew up, and their parents were born well before them in the 20s, et cetera. And when you look at how American society functioned and what we had to do as so-called black folks in this society, a lot of the parenting was forced to be dysfunctional because society was dysfunctional. And so from that piece, you can, like, if you can just like accept that, most of us grew up in dysfunctional homes. I can give you all kinds of examples. One of the main examples I give is how many of us took self-esteem hits, and it was very natural for it to be done because it was done with protection. Perfect example, mother, in slavery, mother has a child. The overseer or the master comes up and says, that child sure looks like they're getting big and strong. Oh, but master, they he's not smart. He's stupid. All the things that she could do to protect her child from being taken from her. And the child could hear that, right? And so it becomes normalized. Well, this is how we talk about it. So then the child grows up, becomes an adult, says the same thing about their child. I'm sorry, sir. He didn't see you. The child is stupid. Now he's talking to a white man, right? And he's trying to protect himself and his family. The child is stupid, And now that you hear that, you grow. This is why, in some ways, when you look at how we function, self-esteem is always an issue. But there's a reason for that. There is dysfunction. All that being said, I think number 6 is huge. Tell the world about your child's accomplishments. The weaknesses are for home and private, and always make your child feel safe with their weaknesses. Create a safe space for their weaknesses. All right, number 7. Predetermine the penalty for disobedience. This one I have learned and I use. My mom taught me this one. Predetermine the penalty for disobedience. So one of the things that Pam and I do, like even before something happens, I could say, I'm going to go back to camping. Legend. Now, you see that right there, that street right there? You have range of this entire area. Don't go past the street. Okay? So those cars right there, don't go past those cars. You can run all the way up to the end of the trucks, and then you can run all the way down to the other side where the water is. All right? You can't go by the rocks, and you can't go past the cars. Okay, Daddy. All right. So, if you disobey me, what will the penalty be? And we co-create the penalty together. We co-create that penalty. And he'll say, well, then I can't play for an hour. Or I can't, he'll first say, I can't play for 5 minutes. I'm like, 5 minutes not long enough, right? Like, and him 5 minutes is long enough. It's like, that's not long enough, right? But then we co-create the penalty. And then it's my job that if for some reason he happens to disobey, I must enforce the penalty, which is number 8. What she says is execute without apology. Like you execute any offense against the penalty that was co-created, you must execute without apology. Like, hey, you didn't do what you said you would do. You disobeyed me. We set up what the offense, we were very clear about if you stepped outside of this, what would happen, and now it's going to happen, and you execute without apology. Like, hey, this is what, and what it does, my mom says this in another one of her writings. She talks about how with children, you want to have very predictable boundaries, because those very predictable boundaries is what makes them feel safe. And so they have very predictable boundaries. And so when I set those boundaries and you cross the boundary, which we co-created the response of discipline for, then it's important to the child that I actually enforce that discipline. Otherwise, they don't know. Like, it's like, so I was disobedient this time and it worked. And then if I run past the trucks, is there really danger on that side? Like, everything becomes a question for them. And it's like, so I must execute without apology. And I must enforce boundaries, because the boundaries are what makes a child feel safe and creates what is a predictable environment that they believe they can navigate. Number 9, always recreate an opportunity for redemption. So what she says here is, when a child has an offense, and so they have been disciplined, that you want to leave them with a memory of success. So in many ways, you put them back. She says you deliberately recreate the situation so they can put their failures behind them. So in this case, now, Legend didn't disobey me. He did, he was partly because we've set these boundaries over and over again, and he's been disciplined. And so he understands, like, I don't go past the trucks. I don't go to the rocks, right? And so throughout the whole weekend, he never did that unless we were together and we walked past the trucks together, at which time he knew, he had permission because he was with me or he was with an adult. But even, perfect example, a friend of mine's father, he was cleaning the fish, and Legend was like, I want to go see. He asked permission because he was like, they're over there past the trucks. I want to go see. Okay, well, walk with the adult over there. And okay, cool. But he stopped and asked. Now, what my mom says here is recreate an opportunity for redemption. Let's say he did disobey. He didn't, but let's say he did. Then what she's saying is, after he's disobeyed, we reset the boundaries. Hey, so again, you will get in trouble, even more trouble, which we would co-create what that would look like, if you go past these trucks and if you go to the rocks, okay? And then you give him an opportunity to redeem himself and go and play. I think this is huge because I'm not sure how many parents would do this, but I know some are out there. But once the child has an offense, it's over. Like, see, now you got to stay with me. Your weekend is ruined, and there's a lack of trust, where that opportunity for redemption should be put there. Because one of the things my mom has said is you never want to reinforce bad behavior. And so if I kept my son with me for the remainder of the weekend, I'm reinforcing the fact that he was bad, because he's going to ask, can I do this? Nope, because you disobeyed. So now what he's hearing is, I'm disobedient. And there's no chance for redemption. And so what you get is more disobedience. Number 10, to close out, is focus on their wins. Focus on their wins. Now, as adults, we know this. It is easy to remember all the losses. It is easy to remember all the bad things that happen. And children have the same psychological makeup that we have. You don't have to remind them when they messed up. They know. They may not tell you, right? But they know. And so what my mom wrote here is, we need to focus on their wins and endeavor on the improved behavior. We intentionally forget the bad behavior. We want to forgive our children's failures. A child will suffer emotionally when their face is washed with their failures. And again, talk about trauma. That, I don't know if it's trauma, but I do believe that it's the type of emotional manipulation that then makes it very difficult for a child to have successful relationships. So 10 Steps for Teaching Responsibility by my mom, Mildred Harris. As we close out the month of June, talking about relationships and covering what I believe, again, is one of the most complex relationships that we all have, and that is the relationship we have with our children. Complex because it changes so much. The relationship with my wife, like, it'll have a few phases, but I think about Legend, it's like that phase when he was an infant. Now he's going through a phase as a toddler. Now as a toddler, he wants to be a big boy, but he's not. He goes from that to adolescence, from adolescence to teenager, and then from teenager to young adult, and from young adult to adult. And as parents, do we know how to make those transitions? And so that is the challenge. Hey, my inspired peoples, Linnell Harris here, certified ontological coach and trainer. I'm so excited that you're watching the channel. By the way, did you know you can catch the show live at 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. every Sunday morning? You can. All you have to do is go to my Facebook stream, Coach Linnell Harris, catch the stream live, or you can listen to the radio show via iHeart at WVON 1690 AM. But since you're here, if you love the content, I ask that you share it, like this particular video, and subscribe to the channel. I hope you're having a great day.